Hello there and welcome to this video where I'm showing you how I am using AI and automation to convert 90% of my service business to show you, a fellow service business owner, perhaps maybe you're a local business, how AI can help move your business from keeping up to leading the way. In this video series, this is going to be video one of me doing exactly that. I'm going to show you how I'm breaking down what I do in my business, where my manual processes are, where my repetitive processes are, and then using AI and automations to take care of 90% of it so that I can put my attention where it's needed best. That's on clients, that's on delivering the service, that's on helping more people, talking to more people, doing the non-AI things that make my business unique and or the things that I enjoy doing and less of things that I don't. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is we want to list out every step of your business. A lot of times when I speak to other service business owners, they know what to do inherently. It's all in their head, right? It's all tribal knowledge. And when they hire someone, whether part-time or full-time or even as a freelancer, they have to convey and teach, this is what you do. This is how you do it. No. You don't do it like that. You do it like this, right? Because they're operating from muscle memory. They're operating from mental memory. But the first thing we want to do when it comes to automations, when it comes to reducing manual tasks, is to understand what are all of the tasks, what's each step involved in getting X done or getting Y done or getting Z done. So that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make a list of everything that I do in my service business, which is apartment locating, which falls in the real estate sector if you're unfamiliar, where I help people find apartments and make the most of their environments. So I'm working with people. I do this. I don't work with people through an online course as my main traditional service business, right? I have to work with clients. I have to get their qualifications, their criteria. I have to get the information that they're looking for. Then I have to go find it. And then when I go find it, I have to make sure they're actually offering what my client is looking for, because a lot of times they may say one thing and you get there and they're like, oh, that's outdated. We don't do that anymore. So I need to go confirm the information and the details and the data for my clients so that when I present the list of options or I present multiple options to them, they can say, okay, let's move forward with these, 3 or 4 or 5 so that they can make a decision. So all in all, right there, that's kind of like the overview of my business, right? More high level than in details, but still you get the point, right? That's what needs to happen from beginning to end. But in the beginning, there are steps that have to happen on my end internally before we even get to conversations, right? Then there are things or tasks in the middle that have to be accomplished before we can even get to searching or looking for options or confirming. And then when we're doing that, there are steps and tasks in between there. And then once everything's found and everything's done, then we have to move forward, and there are tasks and elements that have to be done there. So there's a lot of steps, a lot of sections and areas that have to be executed sequentially, intentionally, right? Predictably, repeatedly, to make sure that each client's experience is similar to the successes that we've had before or the new successes we want to establish for the future. So quick recap as far as what this is, why we're doing it. And in case you have not met, if we have not met, my name is Marcus, and I help service businesses grow with AI-powered sales and operations, backed by my 17 plus years in go-to-market initiatives for enterprise and SMB companies. So I've been doing sales and operations for a little while, but the world is quickly changing with the onboarding and the ramping up of AI. You have a lot of companies who are using AI, testing AI, playing with AI. And in most cases, if we just look at the numbers, I believe the last time I saw it, that there were companies that had an 80%, 80% failure rate with their AI projects. And like 40% of them have just been abandoned, right? Because it's like, okay, we tried it, not fun, don't get it. I need to continue focusing on business. I need to continue focusing on helping my clients because that's today. To say I think was cool. But what we're also saying is that the AI adoption or AI automation adoption is not slowing down. It is still ramping up. So this is my way of not only helping my own business, right? But also trying to help other local or service business owners implement this, understand this, to understand the opportunities they have available to them today to build the business that they want for the future. And even if you don't want to do it yourself, even if you don't want to learn it yourself, that's quite all right. You can still be familiar with what's happening so you know what to do when you hire someone, or maybe you want to work with me to implement some of these solutions or some of these AI automations into your business. You're not clueless going into it. You have a good idea of the platforms that are being used, why they're being used, and then you can say, okay, cool, I understand that, I get that, let's move forward. And then you are a step closer to a business that you have fallen in love with again, because a lot of the things you don't like to do or you have to do over and over and over and over again can now be pushed off to an AI automation or to an AI agent. So that's the whole purpose of this video series here. Let's go ahead and get started into it. So first things first, let's make the list. All right, so we got that done. We made a list, right? A quick list of all the business steps and actions steps needed for me to conduct my business, right? This is from helping clients to getting client information, getting the lead, starting that off first, getting the lead, qualifying it. What do I do after that? What direction does it go in? And this took me about 2.5 hours, right? So if we take a look at the timestamp here, we can see I started this at 10:29, and here we are, 12:30. So about 2 hours. I thought 2.5. So that was a good amount, right? So you go here so you can just kind of see it, like there was nothing there. So this took a little bit of time, but hey, it's worth it. And I know you may say, look, Marcus, I don't want to take 2 hours to create steps for every part of my business. I know what to do, I know how to do it. But here's my argument to implore upon you to do this, because now you have the foundation to SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures. So if you have someone who comes on board, whether it be a part-time person, full-time person, freelancer, or a virtual assistant, you have all the steps needed for a successful transaction or a successful uh, experience for your clients that they can reference and can follow through without needing so much of your time. So I do understand the time commitment required to do this, but you have to do it once. Right? So it's better than you having to spend, 2 hours every time you bring on someone new, or, someone interrupting or breaking the momentum of you doing what you do every time they have questions, right? But this is the foundation needed to automate or to AIitize your business. Now, right now, I just have this as a list. I don't have it broken up into sections. I don't have it broken up into different phases, which I am going to do a little bit later. But right now, we can see we have 61 steps, 61 actions that occur in any given moment when I'm helping clients, right? So the next step we want to do is, now I'm going to break this up into sections, but I want to leave it as it is for right now. I'll create maybe a second action list by segment, uh, client experience. Well, it's not only about client, the client is in there. I would say the business phase. Okay. Because I also included sections in there of, hey, what I need to do to get paid. What are the steps to getting paid? Do I need to create a transaction? What teams do I need to involve? the follow-up process. If I'm looking for, information, or if I need reference information, how many times do I follow up? When should I follow up? Should I follow up every 7 days? Should I follow up every 3 to 5 days? Right. So those steps are included in there as well. I highly recommend you doing this for your business. Again, probably not for you because you know how to do it, but if you start getting more clients, then you can make sure that every client has a repeatable experience. If you bring somebody on, they have something they can reference if you're not available or if you're busy or out on call. And just kind of the best thing is, if you are looking to AIify or automate your business, you have a really good map that's already laid out to know, like, okay, this is what I need to focus on now. This is going to be the automation's next steps, and this is going to be the phase of this automation or set of automations, right? So the planning phase is essentially what we're kicking off here, and this is why we want to go ahead and make this list. So now that we have that list, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few minutes here and I'm going to segment it. Again, I'm going to keep the list here as it is. I want it flowing uninterrupted because I also want to know how many steps, 61 total. Now I'm going to break this down here. And then from here, this will let me know, okay, these are the categories, right? I'm quoting because it's not really called categories, but just for the sake of explaining the next steps, this will be the categories that I chunk out the automations into, or what categories these automations will fall under. So that will also help with the next steps of this, which is creating a layout, laying out the automation, mapping it out, seeing how things connect, which then helps us to identify what platforms, what tools that we can either use or we're going to have to create to make all this happen. So let's jump into that next step right now. I'm going to go ahead and take some time and work on this, and I will cue back in when this is done. All right, so as you can see, we did break the action list down here in segments. So I scroll here, you can see there's a lot, right? If you don't want to scroll through, or if you're doing it, you just kind of want a quick reference, you can look right here to the left side. And this is where we have the complete actions, right? And then if we go to action list by business phase, that's what we see here. And then you can see each header here that follows below. Now, you're probably wondering, like, hey, what's the color coding thing, right? So the main thing behind here was to get a true sense of what actually needs to be automated, right? And so as I broke down each one of the steps here, I said, okay, what is already automated, or what is something that I am unable to audit, or excuse me, I'm unable to automate, right? I pretty much did pretty much did an audit to figure out what could be automated or not. And so since there are third party, platforms that are being used, since there are, actual human things that have to be done, like right here, tour day, on a tour day, I cannot have the AI arrive to the first property 15 minutes before the tour, right? That's something I have to do. So this is not a step that can be automated. And so if it can't be automated, I put it in red. Or if it requires conversating or discussing something in person that can't be automated, right? If I'm going to escort my clients to the property tour, I can't have AI go to the property for me. So it was put in red, right? If I need to have a conversation, which is, something I have to do in person, again, that's why it's put in red. Where you see that it's in green is where we already have automation in place. So, hey, get leads. We typically use a form already, which automatically syncs to our CRM. And when it syncs to our CRM automatically creates a deal, and that deal is automatically updated with basic information. So we're already doing that. So we don't really need to do that right now. And so what we see here are the available tasks here in the black colored font. And I went and did an extra step by creating a breakdown summary here. Now, the reason why I'm creating the breakdown summary is because this allows me to have quick reference to this as a project, right? Scope of work. What is involved? How is it broken down? So that once we're in the middle of creating a workflow, not having to do, you know, last minute updates. I'm not having to count every every section or every task over and over and over again. But we see that this has been broken down into 14 phases, which is going to be 6 main phases or topics, and then 8 sub phases, and that's where you get the 14 from. So a main phase would be like the lead generation, right? Here, this would be a main phase. The sub phase would be the H3, or as you see here, it's indented under this main topic here. Because all of these little things, all of these little steps, or all these headers will fall under the main client experience apartment search here in this example. And the way that I broke it up, if you're kind of wondering, like, okay, well, what's the logic behind breaking it up like that? Is because when you are dealing with automations, you're dealing with AI, when you're dealing with trying to create automations, you have to understand the platforms that you're using. You have to understand the limitations of AI. You also have to understand the abilities of the automation, because a lot of times the platforms that you're using for automation and the functionality and the tools that you're using for these, automated workflows are based on usage, right? Or based on what they call maybe cycles, or they call them operations, or they call them runs, like, hey, it ran through, or this is an automatic run. Those are based on a utility pricing structure. So you have so many, per month, or you have so many per year if you, pay for an annual plan. But when you start trying to stuff a lot of these operations or these runs or these cycles into one automation, you could break it, because other parts of that automation may need to sync. The platform may need to have a minute or two before it moves on to the next thing. Or if you have too many things running, the automation may try to do 4 things at one time when really you wanted it to be done uh, in a sequential manner, right? So I'd like to break things down to be no more than maybe 5 to 7 steps per section. And so that's how we're breaking down each one of these phases here. The most would be 7. The least we probably see is like in 2, like you see right here under narrowing search results, right? And so that's how we broke down each one of these groups of tasks, based on what would be considered a new element or a new category before kicking off to the next one. How can we accurately depict the beginning and the end of a particular workflow or a particular automated process? So that's where we're getting the sub phases from. That's how we're kind of breaking it down. And I also put that here. Hey, there's 3 2 7 steps in each phase. And let me actually just make that 2 instead of 3, since I did see 2 steps up there. And this allows me to be able to quickly reference how many steps are in each section when I'm actually down in the weeds, or the team is down in the weeds on the automation build outs. Now, I also wanted to create a automation task inventory, and this is more for project purposes. So the whole premise behind this YouTube content series is to automate 90% of the business, right? Automate 90% of what can be automated within my service business. So if we see that we have 4 tasks that already have some type of existing automated process, well, then we don't really need to count that as a task that needs to be automated, right? Because it's already done. Then we also see, like, hey, there are 16 tasks that are just exempt because we can't do it, right? You can't automate showing up in person. You can't automate physically being present at an apartment property, or you can't you can't automate an in-person conversation because you're there present escorting your client. So those have been removed as well. So after we take the what's already automated into consideration, as well as what's exempt under consideration, we have about 42 available tasks that can be automated, or we will attempt to automate them. And when we look at the 42 remaining tasks and take 90% of those, that equals to about 38 tasks. And I said about because the actual number is 37.8, but we just go ahead and round up and make it 38 tasks. Because if you do 37, then you leave out the 0.8, which then wouldn't make that truthful. So 38 tasks is what we're going to focus on automating through regular automation workflows or through AI. And a lot of times we'll use the AI for um, determinations, right? Filtering out, having to make decisions. Hey, is this an option? Is this apartment option good for the client based on the criteria that we have set? Make that decision, AI, right? And that's how we're determining that piece there. So that's why you'll hear me use a mix between AI and automation, because some things are just automation, right? It's just workflows, right? Automated workflows. And some things will be AI, and those are going to be the cases where a decision has to be made, where it has to determine yes or no based on the information that it's provided. And it's not necessarily cut and dry if it's just a regular automated workflow. So just a little more context in case you're trying to build out your own AI or automation workflows. That's how we're kind of thinking about it here. This is how we've broken this down. And with this being complete, again, like I said earlier, we pretty much have a scope of work, a project scope here. And so we'll go ahead and get into it. And the first thing I think we're going to tackle is now laying it all out. So you have everything in a document here. You have everything broken down. You have your phases. Now we need to understand what the workflow automation looks like, and we want to diagram that, right? We want to put that in a visual planner so that it's easier for us to say, okay, these particular steps need to fit in this category and it needs to connect with this. And if it's a yes, go here. If it's a no, go there. If this, then that. And that's what we're going to lay out next. So let's get to it. Now, before we go and start laying out visuals, one thing you don't do is to just start accessing it and laying out visuals. The first step is to understand like all these different steps and all these different phases that we have just laid out. Which ones are going to go into the same automation? Which one is going to go into, say, one set of steps, one set of automations, which will go to another step of automation? Should 7 steps be in one automation, or should we break up those 7 steps into 2, 2, 2, or in one? Well, one wouldn't make any sense, but like 2, 2, or then 3, right? Do we have 4 steps in one workflow, and then we have the remaining 3 steps, so that all 7 steps are taken care of? That's what we have to understand here, and I would love for it to be as simple as like, hey, these are all lead generation, so they all go together. And this is all communication before we send the initial options or whatever the next step is for your service business. And so they should be all together, because what ends up happening is certain steps within each phase may lead to a different platform, or may be something that you can only do in a standalone platform that doesn't have an API connection in this world today. Yes, there are plenty of places, plenty of platforms and technologies and products that don't offer a consumable API, right? Consumable API meaning an API that you're able to consume or have access to in order for your process, your steps to work with that product or that technology. Some companies don't let that. They don't allow public access. There is sometimes a cost associated. It just all depends on the company, the platform, and how they have it set up. So then you have to start looking at, okay, well, if I have, this phase, as we saw in the list of items, a list of steps that we generated and we created here earlier, Some of them were manual, meaning that, hey, they were available for us to automate in some way, but then some of them were not. And like in our first one, we saw that the lead generation piece, there was like 3 or 4 steps, but 2 were not able to be automated from this end. I think only 1 was able to be, what was a manual task. So then do we tie that one task to be its own automation somehow to another task and another phase? Doesn't make sense to do that because it's not really an automation if it's one step. If it's one step, you're automating what, right? So it has to connect to something in order for it to be an automation workflow. And we want to focus on workflows, right? Because the only way that you can truly automate 90% of the manual task in your business is if you do it in a very efficient way. And the most efficient way is to have multiple steps done at once, right? That's how we eliminate the manual task choke point, bottleneck that most service businesses or small businesses in general face. So what we're going to do first is to take a look at the steps and the phases that we've already laid out, we've already categorized, we've already separated, and figure out what's going to go together, and then we'll create visuals based on how we put those together. Okay, so now let's take a look at the list, and then we'll jump into the visualizations and kind of wrap this first video up, because all we're doing here is preparing for the actual work. And yes, I do recommend taking this much time to kind of carefully think through what you already have so you know what you're looking to do and you don't get lost in the sauce once you start. All right, so jumping into the list right now, and then we'll slide right over into visuals. All right, so here is the original list that we had, right? We are at the sections list part. Let me go ahead and move my face out of the way. There we go. We're at the action list part. As you can see here, when we laid out all the steps, that's what we covered here. So just wanted to show you that this is the same document. We're still using the same thing. But here's what we're looking at now, right? Because now that we have these phases, we've had these categories as far as each one of these steps and where they fit, now we have to start thinking about where does each one of the manual tasks fit in a workflow. So here we see lead generation evaluation, understanding lead needs, determine lead status. That could be a workflow, but that's a 2-step workflow, right? We'll have to use AI in the sense of understanding, right, what a prospect may need, what they're looking for, their timeline, right? Because again, when we're thinking about AI, we want something that is going to determine and decide the next steps, right? If it doesn't have to decide, or if your workflow doesn't require a decision, then there's always conditions that you can use, but then that's now just general automation, and automation has been around, I don't want to say forever, but it has been around for at least has been around forever. Automation is not new, right? And so I want us to be very specific about the language that we're using, because not everything that's automation is AI, and everything that's AI is not automation, okay? The way that we're going to determine it moving forward is that AI is needed to make a decision. It's having to evaluate and determine something that cannot be solved by conditional logic. And conditional logic is if this, then that. If it's conditional logic, it's automation. But if there has to be an evaluation, then that's going to be more AI, and that is why lines are so blurred, and you're hearing people use the term interchangeably, right? They're using it as the same thing in most cases. So anyway, here we have lead generation, we have 2 steps here. Now, as we see as the next phase, client experience, all of it's red, right? Remember, we said red means that these are exempt because either they're already automated, or because it's a third party, or it's something that we can't necessarily automate, right? So being an apartment locator, I can't have AI show up at an apartment to escort my client. So that would be an exempt step. We wouldn't count it. So when I look at this though, I see, okay, lead generation evaluation, that has 2 available manual tasks. And then when I look at the comms and search results, I say I have 1, to and here. So maybe there is an opportunity for me to create one workflow that incorporates these 4 steps. Then I see another one, there's a single one here under narrowing down the search results, right? So what I would probably do here is probably create a workflow where lead generation and evaluation will have some type of conditional automation. Evaluation meaning if they're within a timeline where we can help them, because if you live in Austin, where I'm from, Austin, Texas, you typically don't see apartments that are available 3 or 4 months in the future. You typically get 60 to 75 days. So if someone's like, hey, I'm looking for an apartment 4 months from now, then my automation needs to evaluate that it's too far out, and it needs to take a different approach to respond to them than the person who's looking for something that's 30 days out, or someone who's looking for something that's a week out, someone who's looking for something that's 3 days out. Yes, I have helped someone where they needed to find something in 3 days. So we need to pick the right workflow without creating unnecessary workflows, right? Unnecessary steps. So maybe we tie in evaluation with, if it fits, go into communications for search results, which then goes into narrowing down those results. And I typically like to hold it here. So whenever I start dealing with multi-step workflows, well, that is a workflow. I like to kind of cap it at no more than 5 steps. If it's really, really simple, I'll probably go as far as 7. I don't want to go too far beyond that number of steps, because it just invites too many possibilities. If one of the platforms has an update or upgrade or something happens, we want to keep it all kind of close together so that you have things working kind of like in an assembly line versus trying to do too much in one station. So this is kind of an example. I've already kind of gotten started with some of the visualizations. We'll just show you here. So this is kind of like doing a web search for today's pricing, kind of laid that out here. This is more at the end of the process where I'm communicating with apartment properties. When it comes to commission, there are certain processes we have to go through there. And this is kind of the map creation when I'm working with my clients and I want to create a custom map to their apartment tour. That's kind of what these steps are here. So I've already set some of these visuals in place, workflow visuals in place. I just wanted you to kind of see it here because sometimes decisions are going to need to be made. And kind of like at the start, automation, it's going to go to like data collection. It's going to have to do these steps within the data collection step. And then once we get the data collection, then we'll move on to the map creation. And then these steps have to occur under the map creations. Now, I've just put this together kind of high level. And then as you see, then it goes on to delivery. I have this what's called like in a reverse planning mode. So that's why you see the arrows going backwards, because I want to start with the end result and then think backwards. And then that helps me to look at things going forward. Like, what did I miss? Did I miss anything? Because I want to begin with the end in mind to make sure that we get the end result and not just master the initial result or the initial step of everything. So these are a few visuals that I've kind of put together. And the reason why we do this for workflows and creating, AI workflows is because once you start getting into AI and you start getting into, generating these workflows, you start getting into some very, very dense material. And you may not be thinking like, okay, next steps, I need to do this. Or, oh yeah, I remember automatically, because you're like, I'm mentally maxed because I'm trying to follow the flow of, we need to have this webhook, then trigger this that connects to this API. And when you start getting into the weeds of, having to use, key value pairs and having to use bearer tokens versus, other points of validation, you may get to a point where you're like, I don't even know what's next right now because I just need to take a quick break. My brain is maxed out. Having these workflows allow you to quickly reference what needs to happen next so that you can keep moving, which allows me or, another individual to keep working and to get things done on time. Like, it's not enough just to build AI automation workflows, but you have to complete them in order for them to be useful. And typically there's a time frame attached to it. So workflows help you not only do your work, it not only lays out the work that needs to be done, but it also helps you stay on track so you can get things done in a reasonable amount of time so that you can actually benefit from using it. Okay, so that's it. We've done it. We've laid out the project. We've laid out the workflows, how we see it to work, right? We have a pretty good map, so to speak, right? We have the journey mapped out. Now we're ready to go. We were able to break down each one of the steps. Then we categorize those steps to understand where those steps play in the client or customer experience. Then we took a look at those phases and said, okay, which one of these steps provide the best workflow, the best multi-step automation workflow for this experience, for our clients to have the best experience. And then we started laying out visuals. Now, I'm not going to bore you to death by doing visuals for each one, but I did want you to see that we did have a few and that we're going to have to map out a few more. I'm going to go back and take a look at some of the details and make sure that, essentially we're proofreading, right? So we want to minimize the number of unclear steps, right? So that we can make this as smooth as possible. What we don't want is to get into creating this automation and then having to deal with a lot of surprises. Now, if you've been a part of technology or AI, there are going to be surprises anyway. So you will not eliminate surprises, but what we can do is we can minimize the surprises. And that's what we're doing here. That's why we spent so much time in this video focused on planning, mapping, categorizing, determining phases, etc. So that's it for this one. Now we start working on the AI piece. Now we start working on the workflow piece. Now we start working on the technology piece, the testing and figuring out what we got wrong, right? Because what we did is we planned what we would like to do, what we would like to happen. Now we also have to go and see what the technology and AI will allow us to do, which I think allows us to do a lot more. But again, I think we can do a lot more than not, right? But there are always surprises, right? So you have to count that in. You have to factor that in. And we're going to get into that. So if this was helpful, if this gives you a better idea to even to do your own project, or even not to do your own project, just to have a little more clarity around what would happen in this type of project for your service business or your small business, I hope you got that clarity here. I hope you got a lot of questions answered here. But if I forgot anything, by all means, please leave me a comment. Share your thoughts with me. Give me some feedback there in the comments. Happy to respond. Happy to cover future things or cover what you mentioned in a future video. There we go. And see if we can't ensure that we streamline the learning curve for you and for anyone that you may be working with to be complete sooner than later. Okay, so again, my name is Marcus. Thanks for your time. Go ahead and subscribe, share, all that great good stuff. And until next time, here's to your momentum.